What's something you only realized was super suggestive way after the fact? Story 1. A few years ago, I was at trade school, and there was this one girl in the class, only one. She was super attractive and had very noticeable assets. Naturally, all the guys were after her, so I never thought I had a shot. Anyway, for a group project, we exchanged numbers, just normal stuff. We texted a few times about class and whatever, nothing crazy. One day out of nowhere, she texts me, "What are you doing?" I told her I had worked an overnight shift and was just lying in my big comfy bed in nothing but my boxers. Didn't think much of it, just being honest. She sends back a smiley face emoji and says, "Wanna pick me up?" Now my dumb self thinks she means like, pick me up and take me to school because I was planning on heading there anyway. So I am like, sure. I drive like 30 minutes to get her. She hops in the car, pulls off her sweater, and is just sitting there in her bra like it's no big deal. I'm staring, trying to keep my eyes on the road, and she just laughs and says, "It's so hot out." While I'm still trying to process that, she says, "I wish I had a big comfy bed right now." And me, being the biggest idiot in history, I'm like, "So do you want me to take you somewhere else or to school?" She just gives me this look, sighs, puts her shirt back on, and says, "Just drop me at my friend's house next to the school." I didn't think much of it at the time. Dropped her off, went to class, went about my day. It wasn't until way later, like hours later, that it hit me what was actually happening. She basically threw herself at me, and I was too damn stupid to realize it. Never saw her again after that. She dropped the class a week later. And yeah, it still haunts me a little when I think about it. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Sitting on a couch and put a movie on. She said she was cold, so I got her a blanket. Then immediately said she's still cold, so I got her another blanket. Said it again and I thought, damn girl, it takes a minute to warm up, be patient, so I got her the last blanket and said hopefully that helps because I'm all out of blankets. Story 3. Back in college, there was this girl in my friend group that I was absolutely into, like major crush. She was funny, beautiful, easy to talk to. Basically the full package. The only problem, I had the self-confidence of a soggy piece of toast and was convinced she just thought of me as one of the guys. Anyway, I had my own apartment near campus, and it kind of became the unofficial hangout spot for our group. I had a big living room, decent space, and importantly, very lax neighbors who didn't care if we were loud. So pretty much every weekend or random weekday night, people would crash there after a night of drinking or hanging out. Now this girl, she had a place literally a 5-minute walk away, like I could see the roof of her building from my window if I leaned out far enough. And yet, whenever we had a big night, she would always stay over at my apartment instead of just walking home. Not once, not twice, pretty much every time. And here's the real kicker. Instead of crashing on my big comfy couch, which everyone else said was insanely comfortable, she would always ask if she could sleep in my bed. "Your couch is too lumpy," she'd say. "Your bed is way better." Obviously, I wasn't going to be a jerk and say no, so I always said sure, and it wasn't just like sleeping on opposite sides either. We would literally snuggle up together under the covers, full body contact, her head resting on my chest, arms wrapped around each other type of snuggling, regularly. I remember just lying there, heart pounding out of my chest, thinking, wow, she must be really tried to be okay with this. I guess we're just really good friends. This went on for months. Months. Same pattern every time. Group hangout, drinking, people crash at mine. She ends up in my bed, we snuggle. I overthink everything into oblivion and fall asleep like a total oblivious dork. It wasn't until years later that I looked back on it and realized what an idiot I was. Of course she liked me. Who snuggles their just friend like that for months when they could literally walk home in 5 minutes? Who actively chooses to sleep in someone else's bed instead of their own just because the couch is lumpy? To this day, whenever my friends from college get together and the topic comes up, they roast the absolute hell out of me. Deserved, honestly. Lesson learned though, if someone is snuggling you voluntarily in your bed and lives basically across the street, maybe, just maybe, take that as a sign. Story 4. A female friend who I'd liked for years asked me to leave the group we were within the pub, get some wine and go back to her place to play chess. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, In the taxi, she proceeded to tell me what a nice person I was, how good-looking I was, and how much she'd missed me for the couple of years we didn't see each other. We got back to our place, got the chessboard out, and proceeded to play for 2 hours until we both fell asleep. Nothing happened because I was a complete and utter dumbass. Story 5. My time to shine. At university, trying to date. I can't remember how many dates with this one guy, but it was soon after we had been in bed together. It was horrid, even for a somewhat inexperienced young woman such as myself. The dates aren't great either, but I didn't know you didn't have to have a reason to stop seeing someone. Figured everything was fine on paper, so to give it the old college try, you know. The next night I text him asking for my movie back that I had forgotten in his apartment. We didn't even properly end up watching it that first night, which I knew was normal. What I didn't know wasn't normal was coming on a 2 hour bus ride to someone's apartment to collect a DVD. It wasn't until the middle of the elevator ride he was like, "You're not actually just coming up to get your movie, right?" and laughed. And I awkwardly chuckled. My head exploded. Like, ooh, did I make a move? I didn't know I had made a move. I just really wanted my DVD back. So I thought it would be rude to not sleep with him, because I didn't know I broke the rules by asking for my movie back, and that's rude. So I gritted my teeth and thought of England. Flash forward like 15 plus years and hello autism and ADHD diagnosis. Everyone I tell this to argues with me about just leaving the movie, which is insane to me. It was the fourth Rocky movie. In the box set, I can't just have one movie gone, and arguably the best one, shaking my head. Story 6. In my early 20s, I was out at a bar with a bunch of my friends to celebrate 2 of their birthdays. Around 10 of us were at a big table, all females. All of a sudden, a drink is brought to the table by one of the bartenders. The 2 friends whose birthdays we were celebrating got excited thinking it was for them, but it was for me. They were so mad. Lol. A couple, male and female, at a nearby table had sent me a red Cosmo. I'm a redhead, and was wearing red. They were a good-looking couple. My friends had even commented on how attractive the man was earlier that night. They were probably in their early or mid-30s. I went over to thank them and chatted briefly. They told me that they still had the babysitter for a couple of hours or so. I continued with some small talk and went back to sit with my friends. Before leaving, the couple came up to me to say goodbye. The man even said, "Never lose your feminine charm." It wasn't until much later that I realized what had actually happened. The couple was clearly trying to initiate a 3-score with me. My friends had told me that they wanted a 3-score, but I wasn't sure. Then when I told my mom about the drink and conversation, she instantly said that they wanted a 3-way. Story 7. I had something along the same vein but across a language barrier. I was in Buck University alone and found a cute wine bar that was super popular, so very crowded. The owner was shuffling people within the tables and people were sharing, etc. So he placed me at a small table with an older Italian couple. I spoke maybe 5 words of Italian. They spoke extremely limited English, but we all spoke the basics of French. They very kindly shared their wine with me, and then ordered another and some snacks, and we attempted to make conversation in French. I thought they were just being nice. The wine wound down. They insisted on paying the bill, and then it took several repetitions before I realized the words they were saying were "Chez nous, our house," and gesturing for me to join them. I had an early flight the next day, so I told them I had to go pack. 5 minutes after they left, I realized I may have been politely propositioned. Story 8. In my early 20s, I was single AF and loved to hang out at this after-hours spot in Vegas. It's dead now. I am so sad. It was cheap. They served hookah on the patio, super fun local DJs, and it stayed open until well into morning. It was just perfect. Not pretentious. A lively party spot still open after I ended my bartending shift somewhere between 4 and 6 a.m. Although I went many times before I was a bartender, when my friend group just wanted somewhere to unwind for a few hours after the clubs closed. When I met my now husband, I suggested going there one night. It's fun, it's cheap. My friend is DJing and my other friend is a bartender there. He was like, babe, that is a swapsters club. I was like, no, me and my friends go there all the time. What are you talking about? So he agrees to go. Within minutes, we were approached. My mind was blown. Thinking back, I'm like, yeah, the mirror ceilings in the rooms, the funky makeup vanities with bad lighting and a lockable door, the copious amount of love seats, the now totally obviously mature themed art in gilded frames. You think you really know somewhere, man. Also, the avalanche of moments I remember how people behaved weird when I said it was my fave spot was overwhelming. No regrets though, I still miss it. Story 9. I went to a bar with some friends. Definitely already drunk. Weed was legal in my state, so I went out to the patio to smoke, but I'd forgotten my pipe, so I had borrowed some joint papers. Admittedly, I'm terrible at rolling joints. A very pretty girl came up next to me and said, "You're terrible at that." I told her I know. She reached around my shoulders like Patrick Swayze in Ghost and showed me how. During this, her boyfriend came and sat across from me, started talking to me and asked what my plans were for the night. Being a bit over nice, I shared the joint with them. They left the bar and I went back inside to my friends. I told them I just met the nicest couple outside, told them about the joint. They all stared at me for a moment before one said, "You know they were trying to have a three-way with you, right?" Story 10. I was in Vegas one time for a convention for a subculture that is mostly women, very mature fantasy positive, and one of our party nights overlapped with an under 25 men's basketball convention. So we'd get a lot of dude bros around the hotel complex. My very attractive friend was coming to the party in full dom gear, including riding whip, and as we rode the elevator down to the party, a bunch of the basketball bros got on, and, scene. Is that a horsewhip? Yes. Oh, so you ride horses? No. Silence until we reached the lobby. We all managed to hold it until the guys were out of sight, and then cracked up so hard. Story 11. I was working at a liquor store as a cashier, and we kept some of the shooters under the registers. A customer asked for a specific one that I knew was under the neighboring register. I leaned over it to snatch one and came back. The man then told me, "Hey, I like your jeans." Me, a dumb 20-something. "Oh, thanks, I actually got them at H&M. 5 customers later, my male coworker came over and explained. Story 12. I was talking to my husband one night about how my mood was low. He said something about needing vitamin D. I said, "You're right. I didn't take my vitamins today." So I went to the medicine cabinet and took my vitamins. Later that night I realized he meant the other vitamin D. Comment. My husband had a legit vitamin D deficiency and low testosterone that was contributing to his low libido and caused me to have a vitamin D deficiency. I thought the joke several times when he was getting treatment and things were getting better, but I waited until he made the joke himself because I knew it was probably a sore spot. Story 13. Climax or jazzplosions, and I still cringe to this day. I was maybe 7 when I overheard one of my father's friends talking to my parents about how he gave one of his employees a large bonus, and the guy damn near had a jazzplosion. In my prepubescent brain, I interpreted that as a cool way to say he was really happy. So I went around for about 5 years saying things like, "We all brought gifts for the teacher, and she had a jazzplosion," or, "When we found out we were going to Disney World, my brother and I had jazzplosions." I will now go bang my head against the wall in my 500th attempt to dislodge these memories from my brain. Story 14. I recall at university an attractive girl I liked that I ran into in various lectures finally came up to me and proceeded to compliment me and ran her fingers along my chest and asked how could she improve her chest, and like a dumb I explained the various chest exercises till she walked away. Comment. One of the greatest pieces of advice about women my father ever gave me was if a woman asks you how to do something that you definitely know how to do, don't explain it, offer to show her. She will let you know what she really wants after that. However, the absolute greatest piece of advice about women he gave me was, let them decide if they are out of your league. Don't do it for them. Story 15. When I was a kid, my mom and dad were divorced, but they started dating again. I remember a day we were visiting my dad and The Simpsons were on. My dad made a joke about a Quickie and I asked what a Quickie was. They rather clumsily said that it was a quick nap. Now imagine an 8-year-old boy walking around saying how much he loves Quickies. Story 16. I was living in a new city without much for family and friends. My neighbor invited me over for a drink one night because she was having people over. Sure, I was bored and lonely and desperately needed a platonic friend. Things got a little odd when she started flipping through pictures from her last party, including some risque shots. I had to work the next day, so I didn't stay late. On my way to work the next day, I realized her and her friend were trying to initiate an MMF triple action. Story 17. A coworker found out I liked working on cars and asked if I could do an oil change on her Corolla. I said sure. Another coworker overheard and was confused why she'd drive 20 plus miles to my house when she could just go to Jiffy Lube for less money. She responded with, "I'd rather my name do it." That definitely gave me a warm feeling inside. So the next day, Saturday morning, she shows up with a six-pack of beer. I'm 21, and she was about 27. I knocked out the oil change and had 3 beers while she had the other 3. Mind you, it was only 10 a.m., and I hadn't even had breakfast yet. Afterward, I gave her a quick tour of my place, and she asked if she could smoke a cigarette. I said sure, and I spent the next few minutes awkwardly chatting about random stuff. She hung out for about 15 minutes before leaving, and I remember waving her goodbye in the driveway. Did I miss something? I still wonder about it to this day. Oh, and just to add, she was a tall, natural redhead. This happened around 20 years ago. Story 18. In college, a purely platonic female friend that was in a long-term relationship left something in her dorm room and wanted me to go get it with her. When we got up there, her roommate was there, and my friend started acting all pissy. When the roommate left, she started asking all kinds of raunchy questions. I excused myself because I legitimately had class and was also a bit confused. After that, she started avoiding me. Found out through a mutual friend that even though I'd shown no interest in her that way, she wanted to take me for a test drive before breaking up with her boyfriend, ruined what I thought was a good friendship of over 2 years. Story 19. I was in boot camp, exhausted, overworked, and constantly covered in sweat and regret. You'd think nothing about that place was attractive. But then, there was our team's commanding NCO. She was stunning, like distract the entire platoon stunning. Maybe 20 or 21 years old at the time, with these piercing green eyes that somehow managed to look both strict and kind at once. Tall, athletic, light brown hair kissed with blonde streaks, pulled tight into a no-nonsense bun. And those lips full, serious, but expressive in ways she probably didn't realize. She looked like she stepped out of a fitness magazine and into a uniform with just enough authority to make everyone pay attention twice. Every night, before lights out, she had this routine where each recruit from her team would be called in one by one to deliver a verbal report. Basically, a debrief of our day. What we did well, what we messed up, how we were improving or regressing. The usual. She kept it professional, firm, but not cold. Now I had this bad habit of cracking jokes. Not disrespectful ones, just the kind of sarcastic humor you develop as a coping mechanism when your body hurts in places you didn't even know had nerves. Every time I made a quip during our little night talks, she'd scold me, eyebrows tight, tone clipped, but there was always this tiny pause like she was trying not to laugh. Then came the moment. One of those days where everything was go, 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 and I ran out of time to shower before lights out. So I took a calculated risk, snuck off after bedtime, hoping I could rinse off and sneak back without being noticed. Big mistake. Or maybe not a mistake? There I was, fresh out of the shower, just a towel around my waist, water still beating down my torso, walking out into the hallway like an idiot. And who else but her rounds the corner at that exact moment? We both froze. Her eyes did a very quick scan, fast, but unmistakable, and her cheeks immediately flushed. For a second, her whole confident demeanor flickered. She quickly regained her posture, scolded me for being out of bed past lights out, but the words came out all jumbled and sharp, like she was talking more to herself than to me, and then she was gone. Brisk footsteps echoing down the hall. After that night, something changed. During the day, when everyone was grinding through drills or sweating bullets during exercises, she'd find little windows of time to pull me aside. Sometimes it was under the pretense of checking in. Other times she'd just want to talk about life, about why I enlisted, about what I wanted to do after. Sometimes she'd share things about herself too, small personal stuff she probably wasn't supposed to share. Nothing ever crossed a line, but looking back, It definitely danced on the edge of one. At the time, I was young, clueless. In my head, she had a boyfriend. I had overheard something about it, so I assumed I was misreading everything. I figured I was just being a recruit, and she was being friendly, maybe trying to help me adapt or stay motivated. I thought nothing of it. Then boot camp ended. We all moved on. A few weeks later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was her. She asked how I was doing, if I'd made it through placement, stuff like that. I gave her a short reply, didn't think much of it. She followed up a couple more times. I ghosted, not out of malice. I just didn't think it was important. I didn't connect the dots. I didn't get it. Fast forward, 3 years. I'm sitting with some of my army buddies sharing stories. When someone brings her up, I tell them about the towel incident, the private chats, the text afterward, and their jaws drop. They immediately start laughing and shaking their heads like, dude, you were that recruit, one of them said. The golden boy she was always looking for. Another added, she was so into you it was embarrassing for the rest of us. It finally hit me then, like a truck. She liked me, she was into me, and I just completely missed the train. To this day, my army friends still give me hell for it. They say I could have gone down in history, become legend among recruits, the one who accidentally caught his NCO slipping. But I was too innocent, too focused, too dumb. If I had even half the brains I have now, I'd probably have a story worth passing down to the next generation. Instead, I've got a textbook case of missed opportunity and one hell of a memory burned into my brain. Story 20. It happened during one of my regular therapy sessions, back when I was in the middle of working through some heavy stuff, mostly anxiety, a bit of depression, and a lot of issues tied up with self-image and confidence. My therapist was someone I trusted deeply by that point. She wasn't one of those cold, clinical types. She was warm, human, even a little playful sometimes. She had this way of creating a space that felt safe but also challenging, like she wasn't afraid to push me right to the edge of my comfort zone if she thought it would help. That particular day, I remember feeling especially vulnerable. We were sitting together on the sofa in her office, which was decorated more like a cozy living room than anything sterile or medical. Soft lighting, a few plants, books stacked in cozy disarray on the shelves. It didn't feel like a doctor's office. It felt like somewhere you could be honest. We had been talking for a while about fear, how fear controls your actions, limits your choices, boxes you into a version of yourself that isn't really you. She was pushing me to think about how much of my life was dictated by the fear of judgment, the fear of stepping out of the safe versions of myself that I'd built over the years. Then she said it, calmly, casually almost. So for example, she said, leaning in slightly, her eyes locked onto mine, how would you feel about taking off all your clothes right now and going upstairs? It took me a second to register what she had said. My brain short-circuited, searching for context, meaning anything that would help me process it. Was this a test? A metaphor? Some radical psychological exercise? I sat there, frozen, completely out of my depth. I think I mumbled something, probably laughed awkwardly, or made a deflecting joke. I couldn't even hold her gaze properly. I just looked down at my hands, feeling my face flush, my mind scrambling to stay appropriate, to stay in control. She didn't push the topic. After a few moments, she simply shifted back to our regular discussion, as if the suggestion had never been made. We wrapped up the session normally, scheduled the next one, and I walked out of there into the evening air, still trying to figure out what had just happened. It wasn't until I was halfway home, sitting on the bus and replaying the conversation in my mind, that the full realization hit me like a freight train. That wasn't a clinical question. That wasn't a hypothetical to explore my anxieties. That was something else, an opportunity. A door I didn't even recognize was open until it had already closed behind me. And, yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're judging her. You're thinking how unprofessional that was, how she crossed a line that should never be crossed. And maybe you're right. Maybe by the strict rules of professionalism, it was wrong. But here's the thing. She was a great therapist. She helped me in ways no one else had managed to. She saw me, really saw me, at a time when I didn't even know who I was anymore. Her methods weren't always textbook, but her intentions never felt predatory. They felt human, complicated, maybe a little messy, but honest, in a way that most of the world isn't. Sometimes life doesn't fit neatly into the categories of right and wrong, professional and unprofessional, appropriate and inappropriate. Sometimes the world is just complicated, and sometimes opportunities pass us by because we simply aren't ready to see them for what they are. Story 21. It wasn't anything super suggestive, but it definitely left a mark on me. While I was at university, I got invited over to a classmate's room one evening to hang out. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just the usual college thing, chill, maybe do some work, maybe just kill time between classes. When I got there, she was super friendly and casual, wearing these tiny short shorts and a crop top. Again, I didn't think much of it at the time. I just assumed that's how people dressed when they were relaxing in their own space. We were chatting about random things when she offered me some chocolates. Hershey's Kisses, specifically. Now, I'd never had Hershey's Kisses before. Where I'm from, they aren't really a thing, so I just thought they were some cute, oddly shaped candies. I happily accepted a few, completely oblivious to any hidden meaning. We hung out for a bit, laughed, talked about classes, and eventually I left, thinking it was just a nice, casual visit. Later that week, I was out with a mutual friend, someone who was a little more, let's say, worldly, and I mentioned the visit. When I casually brought up the chocolates, she just gave me this look. You know the one, half amusement, half pity. She immediately dragged me into a nearby store and straight to the candy aisle. She picked up a bag of Hershey Sips Kisses, flipped it around and pointed to the back where it described the chocolates as being a sweet way to show affection or a little kiss for someone special. Cue the light bulb moment. I stood there, feeling like the biggest idiot on campus, piecing it all together. The short shorts, the crop top, the kisses. All the signs were there, and I had sailed past every single one without even a second glance. Needless to say, I've never looked at Hershey's Kisses or crop tops the same way again. Somewhere out there, that classmate probably thinks I rejected her, but honestly, I just didn't get it until much, much later. Story 22. Okay. First of all, don't judge me. English is my second language, all right? Things get lost in translation sometimes, and this was definitely one of those times. So, about 3 years ago, my family from Australia came to visit us here in Brazil. It was a big reunion, lots of noise, hugs, food, typical chaotic family energy. I was so excited because, my cousins from overseas were basically like celebrities to me. They had cool accents, funny expressions, and they knew all these English slang words that I had never heard before. One cousin in particular, let's just call her Emma, was only a few months older than me, so naturally we ended up spending a lot of time together. And like all cousins do, we annoyed the hell out of each other, constantly. We would tease, prank, and throw harmless insults back and forth like it was a full-time job. Now, every time I did something she thought was weak or silly, like chickening out of a dare or getting scared of a bug, she would laugh and call me a wussy with a P. And me, being the sweet, innocent, totally clueless kid I was, thought that wussy just meant something like puppy. Small, cute, harmless little thing. It actually made perfect sense in my head. I even thought it was kind of adorable that she had this funny Australian way of calling me a little puppy whenever I was scared or shy. So naturally, I started using it too. I would call my little brother a wussy when he didn't want to go outside in the rain. I'd tell my friends at school they were wussies when they didn't want to try the spicy snacks. I even used it around my parents once or twice, thinking I was being cute. No one corrected me. Not one person pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you probably shouldn't use that word." Maybe they thought I was too young to understand. Maybe they just didn't want to have the awkward conversation. I don't know. I went on blissfully ignorant, throwing around the word like it was the most casual thing in the world. Fast forward about 2.5 years later, I'm sitting in an English class, not even an advanced English class, just a regular conversation class. The teacher is explaining slang words, and somehow, the word wussy comes up. And when she explains it, she's very serious. She says it's a rude, inappropriate word for private parts, and also used as a harsh insult when calling someone weak. I remember just sitting there, frozen in my seat. My life flashed before my eyes. All the moments I called people wussy flashed before my eyes. My poor little brother. My classmates. Even my parents. I was devastated, absolutely mortified. I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out again. I think I actually turned redder than a tomato right there in class. And to this day, whenever I think about it, I still feel a tiny bit of my soul leave my body. Moral of the story, if you're learning a new language, double check your slang before you start using it everywhere. Trust me. Story 23. It was right at the beginning of my senior year of high school, that weird time when you're technically an adult but still very much a clueless kid. A bunch of us were hanging around outside before classes started, just goofing off, half asleep and killing time. It was one of those early fall mornings when the air was still warm, but you could just barely feel that edge of coolness that meant summer was dying out. I was standing there with a group, talking about nothing important, when this girl, let's call her Sarah, wandered over. Sarah was one of those people who was always friendly to everyone, including me, but she'd never really given any signs that she was particularly interested in me, if you know what I mean. She was pretty popular, always smiling, the kind of girl who felt just a little bit out of my league, even if we were technically friends. Anyway, out of nowhere, she just casually says, loud enough for everyone around to hear, "Hey, I had a dream about you last night." I blinked, caught off guard, and probably said something super clever like, "Oh yeah," trying to play it cool even though my heart immediately started racing. She laughed and said, "Yeah, we banged in my dream." Now mind you, I was 17, hormones raging, brain barely functional. This should have been a green light the size of a skyscraper. A giant, flashing neon sign that read, "This is your moment, idiot." But what did I do? I smiled, tried to act casual, like this was totally normal breakfast conversation, and asked, "Was it good?" She grinned, a little mischievously, and said, "Yeah, it was pretty good." And then, in what has to be one of the dumbest moves of my entire teenage existence, I just smiled and said, "Cool," and then walked away. Walked away, didn't said flirt, didn't joke back, didn't ask to recreate the dream, or even hang around her a little longer. Just left. I think about that moment sometimes, not in a way that keeps me up at night or fills me with regret, but more like one of those memories you stumble on while cleaning your mental attic. You hold it up to the light, shake your head, and laugh at how utterly, blissfully dumb you used to be. It took me years, and I mean years, to realize what was actually happening that morning. Years before the penny finally dropped that Sarah was opening a door wide enough to drive a truck through, and I didn't even notice. I just thought it was funny. I thought she was just telling a weird dream for laughs. It never even occurred to me that she might be flirting or dropping a giant hint that she was into me. This was 30 years ago now, a whole lifetime ago. No, I don't lose sleep over it. But every now and then, when I'm feeling especially nostalgic, I remember 17-year-old me, grinning like a fool, saying cool, and walking off like the king of missed opportunities. And all I can do is laugh, and maybe cringe a little, at how gloriously clueless I was. Story 24. During my teenage years, I was at a house party, fresh off a breakup with my ex. I wasn't in the best headspace, just kind of floating around trying to not think too hard about it. I ended up hanging out most of the night with this girl who was one of my closest friends at the time, totally platonic in my head. Like, absolutely no romantic thoughts about her at all, just one of the boys in my brain. We were off to the side chatting about life and relationships and all that deep teenage nonsense when I mentioned I needed to piss. She laughed and said she needed to go too, so naturally, we just went together. It wasn't weird to me at all. We kept talking the whole time. No looking, just casual conversation, like it was totally normal. Teenage brains are weird. While we're both doing our thing, she randomly asks me, "Do you shave down there?" I kinda laughed and said something like, "Nah, not fully, but I keep it trimmed, gotta maintain, you know." Then, without missing a beat, she says, "I'm fully shaved," and straight up pulls down her stuff and shows me everything, like zero hesitation. Standing there, stuff halfway down, showing me the full VIP area, asking, "Do you think it suits me?" I kind of froze because again, platonic friend in my brain, and after a second I just stammered out something like, yeah, looks good," and immediately was like, "Anyway, we should get back to the party." And that was that. We went back. and I didn't think another thing about it. A few months later, I was telling a mate about it, and he just looked at me like I was the biggest idiot on earth. That's when it finally clicked what she was actually trying to do. And honestly, thinking back, that wasn't the only time she tried. There were a few more little moments, leaning in close, finding excuses to touch my arm, wanting to hang out alone at weird times, but I was just blissfully unaware the whole time. Eventually, she straight up told me she liked me, because clearly subtlety wasn't going to work. Fast forward 15 years and nothing's changed. My fiance now loves to point out when women are flirting with me at the pub or wherever, and I still just blink at her like, wait, what? Apparently, women could set up neon signs and fire off flares, and I'd still just think they were being friendly. At this point, I've just accepted it. Some people are naturally smooth. Some people can read a room. Me? I'm just out here missing signals like it's an Olympic sport. Story 25. Mid-90s Sive. I'm in my early 20s. My ex-husband and I decided to take a weekend trip to Mackinac Island, Michigan. On the ferry over to the island in the morning, we sat by a couple, a lot older than us, on the upper deck of the boat. They made small talk with us while we made our way across the lake. They were nice, didn't think much of it. That afternoon, we ran into them again on the island while we were shopping on the main street. Some small talk was made, and the typical "so we meet again" comments were thrown around. Of course, we saw them on the ferry ride home, too. Overall, they were fun, and we made pleasant small talk. That night back in Mackinac City, we were at a fireworks show at an outdoor shopping spot. There was a fountain and bars and restaurants. It was pretty packed with people, families, kids. People were having fun on a summer evening. We ran into the couple again. They were all cleaned up, cotton shorts and a polo shirt on the guy, and a nice dress on the lady. There was a fountain, and we all had cocktails. We watched the fireworks together and talked about where we were from and what we did for a living. My ex split off and was talking to the guy, and the lady and I were gabbing about something on our own when all of a sudden she asks me. My reply? I've always wanted to try, but I don't really know how to dance that way. She just stared at me. Turns out my husband was making plans to go get a drink with him. That turned into the longest and most awkward night of my life. Story 26. I was a huge nerd as a kid, honestly, still am. And I was the kind of kid who would sit and read Newsweek for fun by like 5th grade. While other kids were obsessing over Pokemon and whatever, I was out here reading about foreign policy and international disasters like it was light entertainment. Anyway, one day I'm reading Newsweek, and I stumble across this article about systematic R-word happening in some third world country. I had no idea what the R-word meant. So I go up to my parents, dead serious, and ask, hey, what does R-word mean? They both just kinda paused, gave each other that "oh God, what do we say" look. Finally, one of them says, "It steps when you force someone to do something they don't want to do." Cool, got it. Log that away in my tiny, overly literal brain. Fast forward a few weeks to history class. We're doing this project where we have to make wanted posters for Hernan Cortés, but from the perspective of the native Mesoamericans he conquered. Honestly, looking back, super progressive assignment for like 2004. So I'm working on my poster, and I write the usual "wanted for theft and murder." But then I think, that doesn't seem harsh enough. Because I knew Cortés wasn't exactly a nice guy, right? He didn't just politely ask the Aztecs to hand over their land and treasures. He forced them. Then I remember what my parents said about the R word, meaning forcing someone to do something they don't want to do. Light bulb moment. So naturally, I raise my hand and ask my teacher, in the most casual tone possible, hey, can I also put R word on my poster? Because technically the natives didn't want to give him their land and gold, so he forced them, right? The look on her face was absolutely priceless. Like my parents' weird look times 1,000. She just kind of froze for a second, blinked, and then very quickly said, no, you can't put that. Stick with theft and murder. No explanation, no follow-up, just a fast nope and a strong moving on. At the time, I was kind of confused, but just shrugged and kept drawing my little wanted poster. It wasn't until years later that I replayed that moment and realized, oh my God. Little 10-year-old me almost put that word in giant bubble letters on a school project and proudly hung it up in the hallway. all because I thought it just meant being mean and taking stuff you shouldn't. To this day, I'm still haunted by the near miss. Honestly, it's probably the closest I ever came to getting suspended without even trying. Story 27. I'm actually kind of glad that I'm a little naive or slow to pick up on certain things. Back when I was a restaurant manager in a big city, there was a period of transition in the company, and I worked under a rotation of different regional managers. One of them was a mature woman. I was in my late 20s at the time. She knew she would rotate out and most likely be out of a job. I remember her reassuring me, my job was golden. She asked me about the city, where to shop, things to do, and seemed eager to chat. One day she invited me to go shopping with her. I agreed mostly because she was my boss, and I figured it was part of being helpful. I remember being completely puzzled when she started trying on clothes and asking my opinion, like, does this look good on me? I gave her honest answers because, well, I thought that's just how women were, friendly, social, maybe just wanting another opinion. I was married then, still am, and it never crossed my mind to think anything of it. Then she said we should go back to her hotel room so she could try the clothes on there. I was totally confused and asked, why? There are dressing rooms right over there. I honestly didn't get what she was trying to do. In the end, she bought dinner for my wife and me that night. I still think back on that moment, and it kind of makes me laugh at how oblivious I was. I don't know if that is super sexy, but in a way that woman would hit me, and I was never aware of it. Story 28. When I was like 7 or 8, my family went to this big wedding reception. I was bored out of my mind. You know how it is, stuck at a fancy adult party when you're still young enough to think chicken nuggets are fine dining. Anyway, they didn't have that brand new cherry Coke that had just come out, but the bartender was super cool and would make me custom ones by tossing a bunch of maraschino cherries and some cherry syrup into a regular Coke. I must have crushed like 6 of those over the night, because back then nobody gave a crap about how much sugar a kid was pounding. At some point, in my endless boredom and sugar-fueled energy, I decided to start making a chain out of the cherry stems. You know, just tying them together for the fun of it. And then, because apparently I wanted to make things challenging, I started tying the stems together with my tongue. Like mid-sugar high ADHD kid energy was peaking hard. One of the women at the table, probably early 20s at the time, noticed what I was doing and thought it was hilarious. She challenged me to a tie-off, basically, who could tie more cherry stems with their tongue by the end of the night. I took it very seriously because, again, 7-year-old competitive mode engaged. Spoiler alert, she absolutely destroyed me. Like, I maybe got 3 done sloppily while she was over there casually knocking out perfect knots like a damn wizard. Throughout the night, there were a lot of jokes and laughs from the adults about how I was learning an important life skill and would thank them later. And it all went completely over my head. I was just hyped about free cherries and winning or trying to. Unfortunately, I also ate so many maraschino cherries that night that when we got home, my stomach decided to commit absolute war crimes against our bathroom. Turns out, maraschino cherries plus Coke plus an entire wedding's worth of rich food equals fiber-induced bum explosion. Good times. It wasn't until years later, maybe in high school, that I finally realized what tying a cherry stem with your tongue was implied to mean. I randomly remembered that wedding one day, connected the dots, and immediately went, what the f, mom? Why did you let that happen? Now it's just one of those stories I laugh about, but also cringe a little bit whenever I see cherries at a bar. Story 29. For me, 24F. It was a couple years ago at a party. My then best friend and I got introduced to a friend's friends at her birthday party, and we both ended up having some really engaging and fun conversations with 2 dudes that evening that were sat at our table. Nothing flirty or sexual whatsoever. Just casually getting to know 2 new people and getting along. We were all seemingly sharing similar views and interests, and during these hours I was so genuinely happy because it's getting harder to meet new people nowadays, since everyone usually already has their friend groups and is not as interested in meeting new people. And it's in particular difficult meeting guy friends when you're someone like me and you have no typical guy's hobbies/interests where you'd connect with them. Anyways, at one point we were talking about childhood nostalgia and got stuck on how we all would love to play Just Dance on the Wii again, sharing out favorite dances, etc. A couple hours later, when the party was coming to an end and we called to be picked up. This would take roughly another hour. They stayed with us while we were waiting because it was very late at night and we were in a rather secluded area. After a while, they, however, suggested we could go back to their place and wait there instead, so we wouldn't have to wait in the cold by the side of the street at night for another 40 minutes. Their place was like a 5-minute walk, and they said in the meantime we could play some Just Dance together like we discussed earlier. To pass the time, I was still so euphoric and happy from the great evening that I was absolutely thrilled. I was thinking like, yeah, this would be the perfect ending to a great day, and how ironic it was since we were just talking about this and was so surprised by their fun spontaneity. I was not catching on at all that they had no intention of actually playing Just Dance and just wanted a fourscore. I was already half agreeing and super hype and almost about to call my dad to tell him the address, going on how iconic it would be to actually end the evening like that. My friend, however, caught on immediately and was trying to signal me, but I didn't get it. She was saying that she's not in the mood anymore because she's actually pretty exhausted from the party and just wants to get home, and my stupid self was even questioning that and asking what's up with her all of a sudden. And then things turned really spiteful from one moment to the next, and the guys were laughing. I very quickly caught on that they were laughing at me, not with me though, because I still knew that feeling from all these years back in middle school, this cruel, nasty, degrading laugh. At this point, they weren't even addressing me anymore and mocking me in front of my friend, asking what the fee's up with me and if I'm good. So I asked what was up with them all of a sudden and why they're behaving like childish a-holes, but they just ignored me and kept degrading me, recalling the things we've talked about all day and mocking some of the things I've said then. My friend also told them it might be better if they pissed off, and since their demeanor got more and more aggressive, I took my friend and decided to walk a couple steps down the road away from them. They mockingly agreed that it might be better for them to leave, and they left us there. No apology, no concern on whether or not we'd be safe. Basically, all the friendliness and feeling of joy was gone. We luckily only had to wait for another 5 minutes after they left before my dad picked us up. Even though, except for these last 15 minutes, it was technically a great day, I mentally felt like absolute crap for the next 2 days because I felt so manipulated, embarrassed, and used. I mistook them just trying real hard to get laid with a genuine connection between people. It was tough to kind of realize they were not actually caring about me, my interests, what I had to say, nothing. They probably just assumed I or we were an easy target, and that makes me angry till this day. Yeah, anyways, that whole thing has crushed my positive spirit a lot when it comes to meeting new people, especially when they're men, and I am now much more reserved, not giving away too much off what makes me with new people, and try to keep my distance because I don't want to fall in the same trap of giving the wrong signals. I don't know, in some way I still blame myself for this, and how naive I was. Story 30. I was traveling by train a few years ago and stumbled upon an old classmate of mine from high school. I had a crush on her back then, but she had a boyfriend that she eventually got married to. The night before her engagement, in the summer after our high school graduation, 1991, we met at a friend's party. Her fiancé was on a business trip, and after a few drinks, we went to my place and had a wonderful one-night stand. During our train trip, she told me that in her entire life she had only slept with 2 men, her husband and me, and that she never forgot our one-night stand, that she missed those days, that she hasn't regretted it, etc. She implied everything but straight told me that she'd do anything I wanted if I took her with me to my hotel. Me, on the other hand, was on my way to a very important business meeting, totally unprepared, having planned to prepare during the night in my hotel, and I got anxious in the idea that I'd show up unprepared in front of my bosses because I chose to sleep with a woman I liked. I was married with a kid on the way, and what C-blocked me was the idea of my boss telling me I did a poor job. That kind of an idiot I was. We exchanged numbers, and I told her that if the meeting went well, I'd call her. As soon as we got off the train, I took a cab to my hotel while she went to the subway station. A few minutes later, she texted me that I was an idiot and that she'd block me. She did. My tried. This all happened some 15 years ago. I quit that job the following year. I bumped into her a couple years later, and she pretended she didn't know me. I know I was an idiot, not for not jumping on the chance to have another one-night stand after all this time, but I could have definitely let her down far easier than I did. Story 31. I honestly never thought of myself as a very sexual person. Even now, it still feels a little foreign to me when people interpret situations as sexual, when in my mind they were just casual or friendly. 2 boyfriends ago, I ended up losing a relationship over that exact misunderstanding. And honestly, it still sticks with me. At the time, I was just hanging out with a guy friend. We were chilling on his couch, watching movies, joking around, nothing serious or heavy. To me, it felt like hanging out with my brothers or nephews, totally normal, harmless, even a little chaotic in that sibling rivalry kind of way. There was a bit of what he called cuddling, but to me it felt more like light roughhousing or play fighting, literally zero romantic or sexual vibes on my end. But my boyfriend at the time saw it very, very differently. He found out about it. Not because I was hiding it. I mentioned it casually, like it was no big deal, and immediately flipped. He felt betrayed, like I had crossed a huge boundary without even realizing it. The more he pushed for explanations, the worse it got. I was trying to explain myself, but every word just made things sound worse because I didn't even understand what he was mad about. I kept saying things like, it wasn't intimate, or it was just like family, which obviously made him feel worse, not better. And since I grew up in a super strict family where even hugging the opposite sex was made to feel guilty and sinful, trying to defend myself felt like I was spiraling right back into that guilt-shame dynamic I thought I had left behind. He couldn't see my side, and honestly, I couldn't see his at the time either. We ended up breaking up over it, his decision, because he felt he couldn't trust me after that. And even though I would never have judged him the same way if the roles were reversed, I carried guilt about that situation for years. I kept wondering if I was really that clueless. Was I being insensitive? Should I have known better? It literally took me years and a lot of self-reflection to even begin to understand where he was coming from. Not that I agree with how he handled it, but I can at least recognize that different people view closeness, touch, and boundaries very differently. And neither of us was wrong per se. We just weren't compatible in how we saw emotional intimacy. Still sucks though. Still makes me sad that something so innocent in my mind could be twisted into something hurtful without me even realizing it. Sometimes, I wonder how many relationships fall apart, not because of some huge betrayal, but because 2 people are looking at the exact same thing and seeing 2 completely different realities. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.